let's concentrate what is going on in Brazil right now. But before starting, I wanted to share with you two or three assumptions or presuppositions or starting point. Okay, just to understand where I'm standing related to what's happening there. First of all, I'm not planning to give a comprehensive discussion or explanation about what is going on in Brazil right now, because I think nobody is able to do so. It's changing every half an hour. Um, and also, I'm not, at least it's not my intention to give any prediction what is going to happen, because this is even worse to do, okay? So, but I will try to do is to explain or at least bring up some elements related to what is going on in terms of the political context, directly related to land, directly related to what has been my issues of research and discussion. So I will try to kind of read what's going on there through land and thought. That's my main purpose. Okay. Second, my point of view, it's a view from a point. What I'm saying, I'm not intending to give you a neutral understanding or reading. I clearly have a political position, very critical to this last 13 years of the Workers' Party's administration, very critical, but not against it. So, because I'm saying this to you because there is even some very radical, small left groups that saying everything is the same. Dilma, Temer, they are together in the same government, so everything is the same. No, it's not. But so that's my view from a point. And the third is that, and not just because I'm researching on that, but I think land is still a central issue, not just in Brazil, but in our countries in Latin America and the countries in Africa, land. Even we have all this talk or speech or narratives that, oh, today for agriculture, land is not important because technology. You heard that before, right? Or in the case of Brazilian society, oh, Brazilian society is urban society, so land is, and land issue, land question is over. My point of view is that it's still crucial, and you see along my talk that how I understand this centrality. Okay, so that's my point of view. Of course, what I'm trying to say is that probably if we had older people in the room who have a more comprehensive understanding or more critical to the Workers' Party's administration. Okay, so that was the title that we kind of organized quickly last week, and then Bill said, "Well, at the end we end up editing, but it's something like that, you know." Related land and politics and how what's happening in Brazil after or a little bit before 2016, and but always trying to relate this with land and agrarian issues. Okay. First point is that when we talk about what is going on in Brazil, it's very important not to restrain or not to reduce the whole discussion into our internal perspective or our internal struggles, okay? So there is at least three key elements that it's important to keep in mind. One is, of course, the essentially political dispute among parties, among a more progressive perspective or a more conservative perspective. Right now, the right-wing wave is really strong in Brazil in all matters, not only on politics, but also on moral issues, on ethical issues. There is I'll come back to that later. There is a huge campaign trying to be like United States, free the use of weapons and all those things that we didn't have 10 years ago. So, okay, so then there is internal national political dispute or struggle. That's one element. I'll come back to that. But there's another two that is very important to understand. One is that this dispute is related to what we used to call, or still calling, the neoliberal perspective or neoliberal ideology. And even if the Workers' Party administration was not able, were not able to break or destroy or move out of the neoliberal perspective, it changed a lot and at least brought back a very important role of the state. And what is happened after 2016, clearly the neoliberal ideas came back very strongly. So that would be a second reason for the coup and what happened after 2016. And the third one, it's also important to keep in mind what I call geopolitics, or the way that the BRICS and other geopolitics is going around, and then the role of China. And careful now, I'm not saying that China's playing in Brazil the same that Russians play in an American election. That's not the point, okay? No, what I'm saying is that clearly what was happening in Brazil with the change has to do also an international geopolitics dispute. For example, BRICS, all the problems, but it was kind of building in the same capitalist perspective, probably. I don't have time to get into that, but was kind of switching, changing the axis of power, political power, and so on. Just to give you one example, China became the highest or the most important commercial partner of Brazil, Argentina, Ecuador, Bolivia since 2010. So when I say geopolitics, we're talking about this international market thing, international capital flows, and so on. Okay, so I'm not saying China is responsible for our problems. They were there before, and they are still there. But I'm saying is that changes. One example: when the National Congress voted the first time for the impeachment of Dilma, the same night, a guy that was supporting that, the senator, flew to the United States. The same night, the Sunday night, to be here in Monday morning to explain to the government and to the politicians that everything that was happening there was under the Constitution, was legal, was right, and so on and so forth. Okay, that's what I'm saying. Again, I'm not saying the United States is responsible. I'm just trying to put a broader picture. We can come back to that later. Okay, and the fourth element of this is there is, of course, different issues related to the coup and what happened since 2016, but it has special, in my point of view, effects and impacts on countryside in general. With increasing the criminalization of social movements, the violence is increasing. I will give some numbers later. It's impressive, but also changes in the agrarian policies, and that would be kind of my things that I concentrate. Okay, I put some pictures and so on, just keep you busy when I'm speaking. So. Just quickly, a couple, just to remind us what really happened, or really what some of the events that happened since 2014. I'm not going to go too much back in the history because it will take too long. But first thing was very important that the 2014 re-election of Dilma as a president, it was a very, very tight election. We went for the second round, and the difference was less than 1% between one and another. So the second guy is part of the coup, of course, and he became one of the ministers and so on. But so the tension, the political tension, already started in 2013, 2014 was really deep because also the economic crisis was there. But anyway, one other thing to just highlight is that in the 2014 election was really tense, and the victory was really at the last moment, Sunday night, the last votes, the less than one something percent difference between those two candidates. And since then, since the election, there has been a lot of saying that she is not, she was not competent and she was corrupt and those kind of things. 2015, we had several, at least 4 or 5 huge street demonstrations on Brazil, asking for, in protest, asking for Dilma's step down, and the main narrative was that she was corrupt, and the Workers' Party is totally corrupt, and the economic crisis that was starting really to becoming strong in Brazil was her responsibility, and particularly the Workers' Party's responsibility because it expends too much money on public policies. So the country or the nation is in debt, public debt, because of irresponsibility on creating all these social and public programs for poor and so on. Of course, that was not exactly the sentence, but that's what. Expending too much on public policies. Okay? And it's very important, it's very key. This guy here was the former Speaker of the lower house. At the same time, in 2015, he was accused, not because of Brazilian justice, not because of Brazilian media, but because of Swiss public persecutors sent papers to Brazil saying, listen, this guy has these all bank accounts here, and where this money is coming from. So there is no way to avoid, finally, to bring up to the public opinion that this guy was charged with around 40 million reais in bribes, taken out from Petrobras, giving to his colleagues in the Congress to re-election, to his party, including today's president. Okay. So that was the contest. So at the same time that he was being accused and his party, now in power, there was all this demonstration asking PT to step down and Dilma. And in 2016, and then I'll move on, even in a TV interview, Temer kind of admit that it was an act of revenge of this guy because he decided to put the bills for voting related to the impeachment process. Okay, it was his personal power to do that or not. Because why? Because the Workers' Party. You had to remember the Workers' Party was the president, and his party, and today's president's party, was the vice president. So it's kind of alliance between those two. So he want the Workers' Party voting against this bribes charge in the Congress, in the Workers' Party. Dilma personally said, "It's enough. It's enough. We're not going to do it." So that decision switched, and then he said, "Okay, I'm going to fall, but she's going to fall before me." Okay, publicly. I don't have time to develop that, but okay. Can come back to some of those things. 2015, 2016, it's very important. All this was massive street demonstrations, but wasn't autonomous, wasn't natural people coming out. There was a key role, different reasons, but there was one key role from the national media, particularly this TV network called Globo. Can you imagine? Sunday morning, they call for the street demonstration Sunday afternoon in São Paulo and Rio. And then Sunday morning, the TV, it's a national TV, it's the most, in the countryside, it's the only channel that people have access to. They are very powerful. They are built during the military regime. they would come in as a flash news during the morning, during the sports, during saying, "Oh, it's today's be a new demonstration. There's not much people in the streets, but see, the people start gathering, and that's nice. There's music." That was the news. Alone, at the end of the day, everybody was on the streets, right? Okay, so TV Globe, and this is also very important. Two national federation of industry, they're the most powerful one from São Paulo, Fiesp, and also from Rio. It's clear now, they paid buses and advertising and social media groups to campaign for those demonstrations. They spent millions on that, and that was their main this duck, this yellow duck. They've been charged because it's a Danish artist, and he said, "You using my art," but that's Fiesp. They have this because a duck in Brazil in Portuguese means if you are being robbed, you're a duck. So these industry guys, they said, we're not going to be the duck for, not going to pay the bills, or we're not going to pay taxes no longer. They're the people that don't pay taxes, but that's what their narrative, okay? Well, so that's kind of general and done. Then I come to land and to see if I can narrow down to what I'm really want to talk about. 2016, for the voting process in the low house and the high house on Senate and Chamber of Deputies, around half of the voting was from this called Ruralista Caucus. It's a bunch of, most of them, male, white, large farmers, agribusiness representative, okay, from all over, all different parties. There's one or two related to the Workers' Party, but they are for sure one of the largest group, very well organized, historically very well organized in the Congress, and they lobbying all the time for their interests, of course. 50% of the voting for the impeachment process it's official, were from these federal deputies and senators, members of this rural caucus, okay? Landlords and people related to agribusiness and so on. 2017, 51% of those voting, because also Temer was charged of corruption in 2017, and he escaped with 2 charges. 51% of the voting were from the same group. Okay? So you got a picture what land and agribusiness and this is coming in. Now, well, one thing that's important, we are talking, a friend of us, Wendy knows Alex from the IDS, he was in Brazil in March, and then suddenly one of the talks, he said, "Sergio, why do you think Brazil is the only one that having these problems? Why do you think that Brazil always the problem?" Okay, that's not the case. Okay, that's not my perspective. Going around, for sure, we don't have Trump in our back. But anyway, it's still one of the things that's important to understand about Brazil. It's a country that it's improving economically or has improved economically, but is still deeply unequal. Deeply unequal. And that's part of the problem, the key problem. I would say I forgot that perspective. I don't think corruption is our largest problem, but inequality, it is our largest problem, okay? But that's something that we can open up in a discussion. So why we are so unequal? I'm going to give one example because it's my field of research, and then I move on. So this is the land distribution in Brazil. It's been historically, but it's even with the Green Revolution, even with this last 13 years of rural development and so on, it's getting deeper and deeper. I'm not going to explain the whole table, just 2 examples. If you look, I know here for those who are Americans or North Americans, you deal with miles and acres, right? Our is kilometers and hectares. But anyway, it gives you a sense what we're talking about inequality or land distribution, for instance, and other things. I can give a couple of other examples. But if you take all these small farmers, all these small properties, all these small peasants and small-scale producer, less than 10 hectares. So means one, doesn't make sense. It's meters also. But anyway, very small plots, less than 10 hectares, it's almost a half of it's official data, okay? It's official agriculture and livestock census. Almost half of all small farm, half of all farms are less than 10 hectares. 47% of those farms. And they control, they own, they possess only less than 2.5% of the land. Okay? If we go just another, and I'll move on. If we take the 2,500 hectares and larger, you saw the picture in the beginning, right? Remember the first picture? Okay, I'm going to go back very quick. This property has 70,000 hectares. Okay, and there are several of them. But let's take only. Sorry, Bill, I'm moving around, but only 2,050. Remember, 70,000. So forget those very large ones. Let's take only 2,500 hectares and above. There are only 15,000 properties for 15,000 farms. This is less than 0.3%. And they control almost 30% of the land. It's enough to show you the inequality, right? Okay? So that's the reason land reform, that is the reason MSCT, and but there's just one example to you to understand when we're talking about inequality, what we're talking about. Okay? Move on. I said to you in the beginning that I have a point of view, a view from point. So I was very critical to Lula's government, to Dilma's government. Like Wendy said, the first 4 years, I worked almost 10 years in the Senate, and the first 4 years, my senator was the opposition, Workers' Party opposition to the government at the time. And 2003, when Lula got in power, she broke up with Lula and she went to opposition, even more in the left. I didn't move to the party that she built, but anyway, it was kind of very critical perspective, very critical to, it's not doing enough, should do more, and so on, okay? In that sense, critical, but not necessarily against. But we have to recognize there was gains, there was advancements. And I just want to show two, okay? One, there is a lot of public policy that we call social inclusion. The most well-known is Zero Hunger or Bolsa Familia. But it's not even the most important in terms of trying to diminish poverty or eradicating hunger, okay? The most important ones, that's my poor economic perspective, is what we call, Brazil has a minimum salary or monthly income minimum. And that's nobody up to last year, because they changed that, the labor laws, but up to last year, nobody that was formally employed could make in a month less than that, officially, okay? But that's not the most important. A lot of the public policies, social inclusive policy, is based on that salary. You know, retirement pension for the poor people, retirement pension for the rural workers, all is based on that. And really change since 2002 was around 120. Let's take the reais so you understand better, but this is the amount in dollar, and this is reais. It started at 200 reais in 2002, and end up in 2018 in 954 reais. In dollars, it's double. Okay, 128, 2. So it made a huge difference in terms of how the people, like I said, retirement pensions, unemployed social security or security, and so on. And also, together with that, since Brazilian economy was moving up, also the unemployment dropped and we got to less than the lowest in 2013. So you see, 2013, the lowest was 5.4% of unemployment. This is the lowest in the Brazilian history. Okay, almost full employment society. And then 2014, when the economic crisis, so the economic crisis was around here. So it was still very low, 6.8, 8.5, and then went up until now is 2018 is already 15%. Okay, so that's just to show a couple. I don't have time to go to the other thing, but just to you to understand that when talking about trying, and I'm not talking, that's part of my criticism to the Lula and Dilma's government. It really changed in terms of hunger, in terms of poverty, but not necessarily in terms of inequality. It's a long debate, but so you got the point. Well, done. I said, if you remember, half of the votes against Dilma and half of the votes for Temer was this Ruralista Caucus, this business group. Because the Workers' Party was bad for them? No. My former brother-in-law once, he said, and he's a agribusiness guy, he said once, I never make much money in my life. He's a soy cultivator. He said, I never make more money in my life than I'm doing in the Workers' Party administration. For different reasons. Commodity spikes, exportation, and so on and so forth. But anyway, then we say, well, if this sector is making money with this, why they are against it? It's a good question. But anyway, look at this. This again is just one example. Oh gosh, one example how the public policies was so contradictory during the Workers' Party administration. The red ones are the credits and social assistance, money, resources, public policies for the family farming, for the small-scale producers, okay? It really increases. It really increases. From 5.4 million reais, sorry, I didn't have time to convert, but anyway, to get a sense, 5.4 to 28, almost 20 billion reais in 13 years. 5 to 6 times. Great. The blue ones, it's my team, so that's the reason I put the blue. The blue ones is for the agribusiness. So it's hard to explain, huh? So it increases from 27.1 to 187 billion reais in the same period. But that's what's going on there. So it's very hard to explain why this agribusiness and large farmers and their representatives were against the Workers' Party. But there is reasons. One of those reasons is land reform. Brazil never had a really land reform. It's kind of more land distribution related to land conflict. But again, it will take me too long to explain. We can come back to those things if you are interested. But anyway, one of the things that particularly the first mandate of Lula's in office from 2003, with his, it speaks in 2006, 2007, the land settlements or the expropriation of land to the landless families. So this is, it's a long story. I cut like 5 or 6. Brazilian constitution has this very interesting concept of land, the social function of land. So all those land that are not productive, all those land that are not fulfilling this social function should or shall be expropriated for agrarian reform. So since 1988, 1989, there was every single government has to put up a land reform program. And that's the numbers of every single president or mandate or administration since the redemocratization process. And you can see the number of families and the number of hectares expropriated. Lula is champion. And that's something, that's official numbers, okay? Another debate would be the non-official numbers and so on. But anyway, even if we take a very critical perspective, say cut in half, it's still the champion. So that was part of the Ruralistas bloc opposition, strong opposition to Lula's government and Workers' Party, because land issue, land reform programs, even though making a lot of profit. Okay, so what I'm trying to say, getting to almost the end, is that and I use in the 13 years, 2003, how to calculate, but let's keep 13. I explain a class because every party in Brazil has a number, and the number of Workers' Party is 13. So they had 13 years of mandate, or 13 years in office. Okay, in these 13 years, of course, there's a lot of differences between the first Lula's term from his second, first Dilma's term, of course. But then we need a semester in Cornell to go through this. Let's keep a more simplification, maybe, hopefully not oversimplification. But anyway, there was several really deep contradictions in the Brazilian economic and political or economic policies, let's say this. At the same time, I show you the other table, at the same time there was a lot of, some of them were really interesting policies on facing or eradicating hunger that I already mentioned, but also on credit for agroecology, on social and technical assistance for the peasant communities, not so much on indigenous policies, and not so much on environmental policies anyway, but there was programs and resources and so on. But at the same time, they believed it was possible to do this kind of double policy program, that one way, enforcing, supporting, giving a lot of incentives for family farming or small-scale producers, but also to the large enterprise, large agribusiness. So they organized from 2005, 2004, 2005 on what they call a National Champions Enterprise Program. That means they chose some huge farms, some huge companies, some Brazilian companies, most of them related to agribusiness or agro-industrial corporations, and they put a lot of money. It's not corruption. It was a credit, right? Loans, okay? But low interest, long time to pay, and because the idea was to really make Brazil a global player. In a capitalist society or in a capitalist world and geopolitics, to do that, you need, strong companies. So that went on. And then there is a special program called PAC, Programa de Aceleração do Crescimento, the Growth Acceleration Program, something like that, that was pouring a lot of resources into infrastructure constructions, roads, railways, electric dams to produce energy, because those companies need energy, needs to, main idea, export. Main idea, the exportation of agricultural primary products, mainly soy. So what is the contradiction? One, this internal between, supporting large enterprise and also trying to combine with landless families and small scale in the internal economy, and international economy too much rely on primary products. It's not sustainable in economic terms or environmental terms in a long run. Okay, so that we call the reprimarization of the economy or deindustrialization. It doesn't mean that the industry collapsed, but they lost their capacity in the national gross product. Sorry, this table is in everything in Portuguese, but I just want to show you the agribusiness importance after this, these policies in terms of exporting and in terms of balancing the import-export, market thing. So this is the line. This is the total in Brazilian figures in reais. Okay, so the bars are the total export thing, and this is the agribusiness participation in this exporting process. Almost 50%, almost a half, what Brazil export is soya based, soya grains and feed and so it's heavily based in primary products. It's not sustainable in any sense economically. Okay, getting to that. Okay. And then say why particular second terms of Lula and also Dilma kind of slow down expropriation of land for agrarian reform. There are several reasons. One is because there was this commodity boom, the commodity spike, and then, of course, the large enterprise, the agribusiness enterprise, want more land to cultivate more soya. So the land become more expensive. So to implement the agrarian reform becomes more expensive for the government. One. Second, the land that 10 years ago the landlord didn't want to cultivate because it was too weak, now it's profitable to it. So the demand for land also increased. So they increased the land conflicts. And there's one. And one of the things that the right-wing parties, and particularly the Bancada Ruralista, did along since 2003, they were constantly pushing the government to stay away from the social movements. Then we had 4, I don't know if you know what that means, but that was the translation, was Parliamentary Committee of Inquiry. Means inside the parliament, you establish a commission that will investigate something. There were 4 against the agrarian social movements. 2004, 2006, 2008, 2010, 2010, 2014. And the last one was just in the middle of the coup. And then they kind of direct more not to the social movements, but those governmental institutions responsible for the agrarian policies and territorial policies, like INCRA, the National Institute for Agrarian Reform, and also the Indigenous Foundation, or the National Foundation for the Indigenous Affairs or issues. And they charge public servants, public employees of corruption. So a lot of people inside the government didn't want to work on social movements, or were really cautious, or really step back in terms of implementing a lot of politics, because they're constantly threatened by those things. So that's also part of it. And in the local level, there was a lot of criminal charges, particularly corruption, and particularly criminal charges in terms of gang formation. I don't know if it's a good word for social movements. Judges, public persecutors. So there's a bunch of, and all the social movements, I had to hide lawyers and going to court and spend a lot of time and money and resources trying to, and there was basically corruption, misuse of public funds, that was the accusation, gang formation, and possessing weapon illegally, knives and shovels and so on. No, I'm going to jump this. I'm going to get new government. And then I will finish. Hope I already said a couple of things related to why happened in 2016. But one thing it's very important to keep in mind, all this car wash thing, the main accusers, the main ones that being accused of bribe was not Dilma and the Workers' Party. They are in jail, except Dilma. Lula is in jail. But the party that's in power. So clearly, Coup was also part of a strategy to save themselves, for sure. Okay. But together that, I said in the beginning, and I will finish with this because I already spoke too long. There is then political struggle and, save themselves. 2, 3, this is this geopolitical perspective. But also, very clearly, the neoliberal ideas came very strong back in. And they were really Machiavellian. They, in 2016, they put in the table all the things they want to do at once. They changed labor laws. Now the minimum salary is not a requirement anymore. Now we have this 0 hours contract, like you have some countries, like you can be hired, but if you don't, they don't call you in for work if they don't pay you. It was forbidden in Brazil this before because they need to modernize our labor laws. So there's a lot of change. They try to change the pension system because Brazil is in debt, so they need, cut expenses. They cut the Zero Hunger program, Bolsa Familia, 2016 at once. They cut 10% of the beneficiary families. It's like almost 100,000 families were get out of the program 2016 because of corruption. Corruption becomes a tool for everything. It's a very important, very powerful political tool. And, and I'll finish with this. And notice that's more impressive. Since they are in power, since there is no much change in terms of the corruption, also the criminalization process increases, particularly to the social movements, but also some urban movements, and the violence. And then I will finish this. This is the numbers of the Land Pastoral Commission or Pastoral Commission on Land related to the people being killed directly on land struggle. Okay, the numbers are bigger, but I'm only talking the numbers of those people being killed on land conflict. You can see 2014, 11, 2015, 20, 2016, 30, 2017, 65. I'm not saying it's Temer and the new government who's blame directly, but indirectly, yes. Why? Because the whole situation is so, related that all these people that are criminals, defending Dilma, a corrupt person, defending Lula is in jail. So who cares if a couple of them being killed? So that's kind of narrative. And it's so difficult to cope to that. just, yeah, I don't have picture, but there was a fire in a building in São Paulo center 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, and was occupied by houseless people, and the whole building collapsed. And the mayor the mayor of São Paulo said something about, well, you know, they're criminals, so the sentence was something like this. It's a shame that the firefighters has to risk their lives to save criminals that are illegal or occupying a building. That was the mayor's saying on the press. It's part of the same group, of course. So that's kind of narratives and comes in and out and nobody cares. So I'm trying to say, and I'll finish with this, of course, they're not pulling the trigger, but there is a connection between what's going on in terms of accusation and narratives of corruption, because it's our only problem, and being criminals, and the increase of violence, particularly against the social movements and popular leaders. Okay, thank you for now. Critiques not so much, but yeah, comments. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks, Sergio. That was really fascinating. I wondered, where are the deaths, the nature of the conflicts where people are dying in the rural areas? Is it security forces attached to the agribusiness companies, or is it state police with whom the conflicts are occurring?
Okay. Can we take a couple questions before just maybe or comments or compliments? There's people here that understand the situation better than me.
Sergio.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, and I totally agree, that the PT government, and especially Lula, he managed to somehow conciliate these two very different worlds, this agribusiness sector and this very powerful landlord that have influence over the Congress, and these small farmers and this grassroots movement. And he's also, the PT is also criticized by that we shouldn't conciliate. Either you promote land reform and then you redistribute land, or you will maintain the situation as it is. So I would like to understand from you, and if we have other models of other countries where they manage somehow to conciliate a policy towards having a very strong agricultural exporter country, and also a very strong family farming system with rights and security in the countryside. So I'd like to see there are any other countries where this reconciliation has worked, or no, and to understand Sergio's opinion on that. How far can we go reconciliating these two different worlds?
Anybody? Yeah.
No, thank you very much for the presentation. Actually, I just wanted to give you more time to elaborate on something you mentioned, but I think it's so relevant. It's the class analysis implied in your presentation. I would like to know more about, for example, the internal class structure of the agribusiness sector, because you mentioned that there are companies, but also there are landowners that I guess are families or individual landowners. So if there are differences in the way the large companies and the individual large owners are dealing with this class struggle. And on the other side of the class struggles, I just want to know more about how are the popular forces organizing resistance about this clear attempt of class power restoration. And maybe I am inspired by the 200th centenary of Marx.
Okay.
To bring the class analysis at the center of your intervention now.
Mm-hmm. Wendy, and then I will try to answer, and then answer or react, and then we go a second round, okay?
That was basically my question, was about the social movements and the leftist parties which were so strong. And you can argue that the MST became less active or present in some ways under Lula and Dilma, but in other ways they were even stronger than under Cardozo, in part because they became more integrated with the state. They were creating alliances transnationally with the Argentina and in Brazil. So it seemed like there were all of these networks and alliances being built across Brazil and externally on the left. And that kind of crumpled under the incredible onslaught of the right, 2015, 2016. So can you just talk about whether you see hope for those networks remaining, and are they establishing or reestablishing a pushback that might either be as abrupt as the sort of right-wing push, or are there ways in which there are grassroots sort of struggles for political power, for more social power, is there any hope for that resistance to be coordinated?
Oh gosh, do I have another hour? Or let's see if I can combine things. Let's see. First, I think it's important to, that's of course, my opinion, that Lula, particularly Lula, but also Dilma, they tried to conciliate. They didn't conciliate. They tried to conciliate, because I don't think there is conciliation. Okay. Of course, if now we are facing this again, right? There will be, well, I said no predictions, but let's say this: the elections is scheduled up to now. So is the Workers' Party and the left-wing parties are gonna alliance themselves. We up to now have 18 candidates for presidency. 18. Brazil has like 40 parties, 42 parties. It's a mess. It's so hard to. But anyway, one of the problems is if you going through, formal democracy, constitutional democracy, blah blah blah, you need some sort of political alliance. Sure. There's no purity in that politics. So, but I would say so. Then, yeah, real politics needs alliances. But I would say probably we should choose better who we ally with. And maybe I'm too skeptical, but I've never believed and trust in any agribusiness company or large landlord or whatever. So from the very beginning, the alliances of the Workers' Party with some of the way they build these alliances for the election and after I would say the composition of the government has some really difficulties, particularly in some areas like the agribusiness. Having Roberto Rodrigues, one of the largest sugar cane producers of São Paulo, as a minister. He had a very modern narrative, but they're so conservative. But anyway, then we had Cátia Abreu. She is, the typical classic old-fashioned landlord. It's very hard to think in terms of not making some sort of composition and alliance. But I think maybe we should think with whom we ally with. And I think some of the largest problem is related to Brazilian political system. And we never pay too much attention to the Congress, but the composition of the Congress And they are saying the next one, if there will be election, will be more conservative than this one. I mean, how can it be more conservative? But they say, the prediction is. So talking about alliances, I think it's very hard to think what could be difference. And especially those, I'm not sure if I agree totally with that, but I will say that, just trying to finish this part. Some of the Workers' Party members said, we been impeached, not what we did wrong, but what we did right. It's partially true, I think. That's what I was trying to explain. But again, I think nobody believed that the Dilma's impeachment would really happen. I didn't until the night when they start counting the votes, because the alliances was counting a different direction. Okay, but anyway, I think this is still a challenge. These political alliances, what is being done wrong and what could be different. And I don't think the Workers' Party and Lula himself and Dilma herself has done, and not them particularly, but the national leaders did a self-criticism deep enough to understand what they did wrong or not. But I would say in their behalf, it's very hard to be self-critical when you be in charge of corrupt, be in jail, and so it's very hard, right? To say, okay, I'm wrong, but you're in jail, so of course you're gonna say I'm right. Okay, that's one thing. Second, related to this, and that comes to the class thing. So kind of, navigating between saying there's no possibility if you consider class struggle, some sort of alliances or political alliances, but after 200 years, we still having not being possible to have a revolution in Brazil. So let's take what we have. I would say the agribusiness. There's a merge. It's very hard to no. There's a merge between the classical landlords becoming very modern soya producers or cattle raisers, and agro industry and banks and multinationals. So I don't think there's much difference in terms of when it comes down to political action and economic interest, much difference between them. And MST used to say that in the past, 10 or 15 years ago, was easy to denounce agrarian or rural violence because you knew the landlord. He would come with his gunmen and shoot people. Now you hide a private legal company that keep threatening the people all the time, or go over the MST camping like happened a couple of years ago, and this year happens again with a plane with agrotoxins that just drop it in the top of the people, saying, "Oh, I make a mistake. I thought it was soya," and just drop there. So then what I'm trying to say is that in this classes analysis, there is a Brazilian economist that used the term that I really like. It's called the agribusiness economics. So meaning there's a combination between the large landlords going through the cooperatives to the modern industries to the meat processor. Never forget this Brazilian national champions just create the largest meat processor of the world, JBS, that to start buying meat processors in Canada, United States, in Australia, in Argentina, in Chile, and okay. So resist and related to that. So clearly, after so many years that we have this discourse of class struggle and the urban workers, they're maybe because of the industrialization, maybe because of the process of automation, but the urban class is so weak in Brazil. Mainly the whole resistance against the impeachment, for the election, against Lula's prison work mainly came from rural movements, MST, Via Campesina, National Confederation of Rural Workers, Peasants' Women's Movement, and urban were the homeless national movement. Our National Confederation of Workers, Coup, lost its total capacity of mobilization. So, so then I think Wendy is right that along these 13 years of the Workers' Party, the agrarian social movements lost a lot of their ground or the capacity of mobilization. But when it came to street demonstration, clearly we were those who are mobilizing people to camping. There is a camping in front of the Lula's prison in Curitiba. Mainly are Via Campesina groups. They are there, you know. So actually, I'm not sure what I'm saying, but you know, clearly, then comes back to the discussion or our very kind of modern narrative that at the end, land is not so important. Important is the urban workers and so on. I think we should also, from our resistance and class struggle perspective, look it again, how our local and population are resisting to exploitation. And I think there is new things that we should pay more attention. I do believe it's class struggle, but not in a classic way. So there is hope. There's a guy very supportive to the peasants movement. He said something I don't agree, but I'm gonna speak that out, and then you take it if you think it's important. They said the Via Campesina, they will come out of this process stronger than they were before, but their agrarian agenda is lost. I would say no, but let's keep that on the table, because then new social movements are coming in. Isabel is here, she's dealing with, there is this Afro-Brazilian communities or descendant communities that are struggling for land and territory, the indigenous groups, and the indigenous group who are also there, you know, demonstrating for Dilma, even being very critical to her policies, because she didn't do anything for the indigenous communities, but they were there because they knew they really needed somebody else. Okay, I kind of mixed up land conflict. Basically, I would say, if I'm not mistaken, mostly of the land conflict is still being from this agribusiness group that moving in, large farmers, companies, private security companies threatening, or even some gunmen from hired by landlords. The problem is that the state, particularly after 2016, is not stepping up for or against. You know, 2016, we have this almost a massacre. 3 people are killed, and 3 or 4 they had their hands chopped. It's something new in Brazil. And then the ministry, already in this, you know, golpista government, Coup government, the Minister of Justice, responsible for indigenous issues, or came out in the press and said, well, you know, we should see, because we're not sure if they are indigenous group. I mean, they could be dogs, they've been killed. They've been, so, you know, this kind of narratives, you know, oh, we should see because maybe they are not, well, they're being killed, they're being attacked. So, so I would say that when land conflict, mainly the actors are still private companies, but they got the state support. Impunity, not being charged, some sort of narratives that just say, like I mentioned, this São Paulo mayor is kind of saying, you know, oh, collapse, but they are invaders, human beings, even if they're wrong. I think you're first, and then there.
Yeah, I was wondering, I don't know if this is too far outside of the scope of your talk, but if you can speak to racism and if that's playing much into sort of like the class struggle, but if you see racism
In Brazil, no.
intersecting, or if they're like how that's manifesting in these conflicts.
Yeah, please.
The question is related to the new geopolitics. How do you think the presence of China is doing some changes, or what has to do with new behaviors in terms of massive repression and criminalization on all these conflicts?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious. It seems that during the period when Lula was in power, and we could see how the economic indicators were improving, and there was, more employment and less poverty, and had the best historical economic figures. And now that is changed abruptly. So it would seem to me that when you have such a big part of the population, a majority, I would imagine, that is being affected by this, if that would not cause them to really react and defend, not necessarily a politician, just the gains that they had made against the threat to those which is represented by government now. So is it an issue that the government did not really do any kind of social, educational, organizational process during the time of Lula, and so there's not very much consciousness, or the people in the cities are hypnotized by global TV, and as long as they have their entertainment, they don't worry too much. I mean, how do you explain that? It seems like there would be more pushback, not necessarily just from the agricultural, MST and so on, but from the mass of the people in the cities that were affected as well. So.
Yes, please.
Can you tell us something about the tax system? Do these landowners pay taxes? Are they following the U.S. system? And what about the state taxes? I mean, the British land states finally got done in by a state tax, death tax, whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
You said that the land became more expensive because it became more profitable to engage in agriculture. Why is the case? And your presentation made me think of China's case. Chinese government also pushed forward land transfer and agricultural modernization since 2008. But according to our research in the field, we found that large-scale agriculture, they tend to fail because of natural reasons. They cannot manage the large-scale land very well, and labor cost is very high, and many reasons that large-scale agriculture tend to fail. And so some of them may just jump out agriculture and engage in the downstream, marketing, or just downscale themselves to the smaller one. So I'm wondering about the dynamics of the large-scale agriculture in Brazil. Thank you.
I will try to react to some of this, and then we get into the end, right? Racism, and let's start. Brazil, it's a very segregated society. Since 19th century, we had this saying that Brazil is a mixed race country, that we have a race democracy, everybody is equal, all these narratives and novels and saying songs and so on and so forth. But clearly, there is, if you go through, incomes, blacks made half of the white men, black woman even less, and all this. And like when I mentioned inequality, then if we bring in like something that urban, rural, white and black, or white in non-white, indigenous and so on, man and woman, then the inequality goes in even deeper. Okay, and but on the other hand, just flipping the coin, just not being catastrophic, and that was part of particularly Lula's administration, and Isabel can help. They try to be more inclusive. Like for my university, they established the racial quota, and there's a large group of Black students, indigenous students in all levels, undergrad and so on. It's still far way to go, but at least there is some. What was our frustration? Like, for example, this Afro-Brazilian descendants, most of them, or a lot of their rural communities, they didn't get their land recognized, their territories recognized, because under the Constitution, it's their rights under 169 International Labor Organization. It's in our Constitution, and the Workers' Party administration could do more. They didn't. So there is a long way to go in terms of fulfilling their rights and so on. And I was saying before, if my reading of our 21st century societies in terms of class struggle, we have to bring in these differences or this, historical ways of being exploited and so on, and really paying attention to the diversity of struggles, the diversity of resistance, and so on. And like I said, there is again, it's Isabel's field of work and knowledge, but I will say this Afro-Brazilian descendants first. So there is a race ethnical perspective very strongly there. Are one of the organized groups that not just support Dilma, even being critical to her, but also things in terms of getting more organized and struggle for their rights and moving on in terms of hoping or hopes and resistance. Okay. Second, tax system. It's a long story. Brazil has one of the Brazil has one of the most unfair tax system. Those who earn less pay more taxes. Yeah, but in the landlord's case, it's amazing. Brazil is not so big, right? So there's not much land. If we combine all what they pay in taxes in terms of land property, is 0.01% of the tax revenues. There's no tax. If they export soya in grain, they don't pay tax. Okay, so I think it's enough, right? So to show the, so it's very profitable to have land. If you don't do anything, just leave it there for speculation for 10 years, you're making money, because there's no tax payments basically. So, and they wanna and the new government just they had to pay this retirement pension taxes, and they in debt for years, and they just simply pardon those debt 2 or 3 months ago. So even when they pay like that, they don't pay, and they making more profit. Basically, some are more critical to the Lula government, particularly to the Lula government, say that he was lucky because he got this boom, commodity boom period. So everything was exporting, was making more money. So that's the reason it was more profitable. But also, it's not only that. It's not just a capitalist relation. You're selling something that you're making more money. That's the reason I put so much emphasis on public resources. even not paying taxes, they got a lot of subsidies. Not subsidies directly like, these world agreements against subsidies, but they got subsidies on low interest. They got subsidies on longer periods to pay their debts, governmental support and technical assistance. Embrapa is the main Brazilian agricultural research center. It's all public funds. They don't pay a penny for that. It's all public resources that they are researching transgenic seeds, neoagrotox, everything is public, and they got the technology for free. So there's a combination of different programs and policies that make profit. If we say, I was talking with Wendy, if we take large scale and small scale and leave out all the public supports and tax breaks and things, for sure they're not profitable or less profitable or unsustainable and so on. But then you cannot take this out of the picture because they are getting those things. Okay, China. It needs another conversation, and I don't want to say much about it. I don't think two things is very important. China is not our problem. Like there are some narratives, when China came to Africa, now Africa is hell. The Belgians were not before, the Americans were not before, the anyway, so our problem did not start with China, but they didn't end with China. And there is very important differences. One of them is that, and that was very important for good and for bad. In one of the crises, 2014, the International Monetary Fund and some others would help Brazil in terms of Petrobras and oil company, but they would impose conditions. China don't impose any condition. Do you want money? Here's the money. We want oil. Finish. What are you going to do internally? It's your problem. So then what I'm saying, and I'm sorry not to develop that, so it's changed the way to deal in international market, international relations, cooperation and marketing and so on. It's something else. It's not the same as historically being like, imposing conditions. IFM, World Bank is famous for that. We are going to give you this money, but you have to do this and this and that. And most of the time against the country, against the autonomy, against the people and so on. China don't do that. But they're not so nice too. For Ecuador, for instance. China is the largest creditor of Ecuador now. And the interest rates is not so low. And they don't care. They don't care in the sense that what they interest in Ecuador? Oil. Okay? So what I'm saying is a different relation. It's in new parameters, it's in patterns related to way go. But in our case, particularly Brazil, Argentina, South Coin, is that it switched the relation from Brazil in terms of exporting or depending on North American importations or European importations. So that's what's changed. And that has to do with power, political power, geopolitics. Okay? I will interrupt that. The last thing, it's already 6. I think it's very important question, particularly during the impeachment process. All the demonstration pro Dilma were by the organized civil society, social movements, and so on. The great majority of beneficiaries of social programs were not there. Why? It needs more studies. But it's one thing is to deal or to mobilize people that are already involved in some struggle. Another thing is to mobilize, involve people that for some reason don't understand exactly how this money it's important coming in. It's not so much, but it's important because we're not so hungry. But who is responsible for what? That's something that is not easy. It's a very large political, social challenge. But I want to add something. And that's the way I understand Brazil right now. Since the whole country is controlled by 7 families, not 700, okay? 7 families control the whole national media. Nationally speaking, and local branches, local, networking. And a lot of them are senators, federal deputies, governors, and so on and so forth. It's unconstitutional. According to our constitution, no politician should own any national, regional radio or TV or not, but who cares? Constitution is for others. So, but related to that, the narrative of corruption is key. That's one reason I'm insisting from the very beginning. If you say, that's why I didn't have time to elaborate that, but when I talk about criminalization, well, I'm not talking about crimes, okay? I'm talking about, because when these numbers, somebody's killed, it's a crime. It's not criminalization. So they had to be charged, go to jail, and had to pay for. Criminalization is when you're accusing someone of committing a crime. And corruption works in like that. So the national media is stamped in the first page. I'm going to give you a concrete example. One of the minister of this government, he was in power, and he's from Bahia State. And the police was, trying to, pick it up something, and got one apartment. It was the apartment downtown Salvador. The apartment was empty, but it was in cash, 65 million reais, around $20 million, sitting in the middle of the apartment, literally in boxes. And he's in cash. Who needs $20 million in cash? Okay. Of course, he had to resign. He was, and then the national newspaper put, Lula is accused of corruption, and a photo of those boxes of money. And the underline saying, well, minister is being charged or something. So the narratives, the images the people build is that Workers' Party is totally corrupt. Lula is corrupt. Dilma is corrupt. Everybody that is from Marx is corrupt. Lenin is corrupt. So they mixed up all this. MST is corrupt. Is a gang. And now there is a new project in Congress to Dilma's government approve a anti-terror law. Now they make small change that also social movements are terrorists. And this kind of narratives gets in the people because they don't read too much. They rely on national TV. This is 7 Family controls the editorial thing. And I'll finish at this. So why these people are not mobilized? I think it's a combination of several things. But in terms of mass media, in terms of mass understanding, it's corruption. This became a very powerful tool. I'm not saying that I'm for corruption, and I'm not corrupt, but in the criminalization of social movements, when somebody is killed, it's very easy. Very easy is not a good word, but you get a lot of solidarity. But when social leader or one popular leader is accused of corruption, who's going to stand for him or for her? Oh, this guy was, professor at university. We have recent cases, colleagues from different areas. One vice chancellor was killed himself because he was accused of corruption, and he was not. He killed himself. But anyway, I thought, well, I know this guy. He was progressive. He had and now he's corrupt. So it takes time until you realize that it's a false accusation, but it's done. And nobody's going to come to the press and give pictures and nice views to say, oh, we are wrong, he's not corrupt. So what I'm saying is that it's a very political toll in terms of who you mobilize for and against the the political or the resistance or demonstrations pro or against changes or some political struggle. Okay, that's enough, right? Or anybody else? Thank you.